Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Left of Greg podcast. As usual, I am your host, Mr. Brian Marin. We have a special guest on tonight, Mr. Mike Lee, who's been a longtime friend of the program. I've been teaching with us for years, been teaching alongside us, studied under Greg, and before that had a very, very long police career, up even at kind of like the higher level of police command. Before that was even an Army officer as well, so been serving his country and community for a long time. So we welcome him tonight. We'll get into his background and some of the stuff we're going to talk about here in a minute. First, I want to quickly introduce the man of the hour, as always, Mr. Greg Williams, who the podcast is affectionately named after, who will always be joining us tonight as well. So before we get started, just want to remind everyone, if you want more information, hit the website, www.arcadiacognerati.com. Listen to us on iTunes, the Left of Greg podcast, or watch the videos on YouTube, Left of Greg podcast on YouTube as well. And please like, subscribe, share, tell your friends, tell your neighbors all about it, kind of grow that fan base so we can get even greater information out to you. So that being said, let's jump right into it tonight. Mike, before we kind of start off, I'll kind of let you, why don't you go ahead and give us a little background on your career and your story, and then we'll kind of jump in from there.
All right, thanks, Brian. Thanks for having me on. It's an honor to be here with you guys. I mean, I love working with you. I'm like Brian said, I'm Mike Lee. I'm a retired commander out of Portland, Oregon. Worked there for 25 years. Prior to that, I did 8 years in the Army, in the infantry and the engineer corps as an officer. I've worked pretty much all aspects of law enforcement, from SWAT to gangs to detectives to homicide, all the way up through the ranks, and retired as a precinct commander. Got asked to join this program with these guys and jumped right on it, and did not regret it at all.
Yeah. Okay. That's so I guess that would kind of lead me right into the first question there, Mike, is you had all that experience, so 30 plus something years of experience, military, law enforcement, and then you went through human behavior pattern recognition analysis training. Not just a basic training course, but a train the trainer course to then go out and teach others about it. So I guess right off the bat is, what was your experience when you first went through that course and first got a really in-depth from our perspective of what human behavior pattern recognition analysis is?
Well, Brian, it was eye-opening for me. I learned more and confirmed more things in that 3 weeks immersive training with Greg than I learned through all the training in my time on the street, and through my bachelor's degree, which was in psychology. I learned why people do what they do, not how they do things, but why they do things, which is the most important thing.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's kind of, and that's what I notice. A lot of people who already have that similar lifelong experience that you have that same, like, wow, like, where was this 30 years ago, or where was this at the start of my career? I would have sped up that gap. So what were the big things when you went through that training? Because I know I had similar experience where I went through training and then looked back at past experiences and went, oh man, that could have gone completely different had I known this. I don't know if you had any of those little moments or looking back in time.
There was definitely some epiphanies of how I would have done things differently. Sitting back, taking just a moment to observe and looking for like, we're going to talk about the anomalies in the things that go on out there, versus just saying, just looking at them and studying them and then looking for more to confirm what I think I'm saying, versus going, that's just nothing. I think people overlook things and more often than not, and don't want to realize what true dangers are out there if we only look for them. I just see things in a way that now that I never saw before. I do it every day. I still do it. I go out on the street. I mean, I'm thinking most likely most dangerous course of action, ML, MDCOA.
Yep.
I think of that now.
Yeah, no, and I agree. And Greg, I know you want to add, so I'll let you go ahead and jump in.
Brian, I think there's an experience that I'd like to share with Mike and get his take on it. I remember coming out of the police academy in the Detroit metropolitan area, and during the police academy, the best training videos at that time were black and white, and they were made by the company Motorola. Mike, you've been around about the same length of time, and you remember that.
Oh, I agree.
And,
I remember those.
even Jack Webb was narrating a couple of them, and your listeners and viewers, Brian, are going to have to go and do a little homework and look up Jack Webb. But the idea was it was the old Dragnet guy.
Yeah.
And the format was, before you do this, you got to take a look at that. And it was always that gruff jacket-wearing cop with the shoulder holster and the 38. The ideas were sound. The principles were sound. But they made no attempt to say, okay, this is the relevance for this AO, or this is the relevance for your time or for your age. And what I think I heard Mike bring up, and I think it's a great point that I want to bring up as well, is the beauty of human behavior-based threat prediction software program, infrastructure, whatever, is that it works anywhere. So whether you're working in traffic bureau as a copper, or whether you're a first responder on a EMS rig, or whether you're an 8-year-old going to kindergarten, and all of a sudden there's a baseline and the anomaly in the baseline is missing, or it's something that's added, you can use a artifact and evidence-based approach to determine the most likely and most dangerous course of action. And Mike, I guarantee that it's probably permeated every aspect of your professional life.
Absolutely. I mean, currently, I took a job a couple of years ago working for my sister. She's a physician in town. They had some issues going on with the previous office manager. I came in, cleaned it up, and they offered me a job. So I use it every day there. I mean, I deal with employees every day. I deal with disgruntled patients coming in.
Sure.
I deal with vendors, and I talk to them, and I'm reading them. I mean, I'm reading them just like you taught. And while I'll never be as good as you because you're the man, but that.
Okay. For the viewers, every time he says that, I got to send him a royalty check. So thanks, Lee. That was really good.
Yes, I'll say it about 6 or 8 times more. So just to make sure, I want to make sure the money's right. And, I mean, 8 times 0 is still 0. So,
That's it.
But yeah, I mean, I use it every day in everyday life. Driving down the street, I going home from work. I use it every day.
Hey, Marin, one thing I want to, there's been a lot of violence this last week and a half, and from workplace violence capers to school shootings, all that other stuff. What I want to disabuse our viewers of and our listeners at home is that you have to stop what you're doing and put on the mantle of human behavior pattern recognition and analysis.
Right.
It's a computer program that's running in your brain constantly when you receive the training, and it's a switch you can't shut off. So it's on impulse power, Scotty. It's running in the background. And what happens is it's like these lenses that autonomically pop in. And as you start picturing things, the gift of time and distance is that time slows down and you start seeing these cues and clusters form, and almost everything is okay. Almost everything is fine and it's not a problem. But then all of a sudden your orientation changes because here's 1, 2, 3. All of a sudden the little balloons start popping and you go, wait a minute, I've got a cluster of cues here and that needs more time. So it's a thing that's always with you, not some heavy thing that you got to put in your pack and bring out and look at your environment with.
And on that, because when it comes to training, we're talking about, and it's kind of part of why I wanted to pick your brain a little bit, Mike. You see law enforcement training has come a long way. It's constantly improving. There's always people looking at it, and there's a lot of people who mean really well. So most police officers gain an extraordinary amount of that tacit knowledge, just going out there doing it every day, right? Just dealing with people. So you learn certain things that can be hard to articulate if you weren't given a framework or a lexicon to describe what it is that you're seeing. There's certain guys that can just pick up on it. Well, I know that because this, but like you kind of alluded to, even when you first started talking, is, well, how do I articulate that? How do I say that? And I think that's where a lot of sticking to the science, which what we do is you can do that. And then once you learn that, it doesn't matter what situation it is, it doesn't have to be chaotic or anything, is you start to get better at that. And I think it's hard to really, everyone talks about prevention and predictive analysis and left of bang, but it's actually really, really hard to do that. So I'll give you an example of a recent one I saw of, it was a law enforcement video. A female officer pulls a car over middle of the night, first goes around to the passenger side, and it's a grainy, it's the camera off of their body worn camera, and she goes to question him, and right away, I'm going, oh, this is all wrong. This is all wrong. The behavior of what he's acting, he's keeping his hood up, he's blocking his face, he's moving around with his hands, he's not complying, but he's speaking Spanish. But even though there was a language barrier, it was pretty obvious he wasn't going along with what was happening. So rather than right there, I'm going, I mean, obviously it's easy Monday morning quarterback this to look back and going, all right, hey, this is where I need that time and distance. Now I can start communicating from here and calling in that backup. So instead she goes around to the other side. And when she goes around to the other side, the guy pulls a gun out, tries to shoot. Now, had great reaction to the incident. So he ended up being killed. The officer was fine, didn't get injured or anything.
And her instincts were good.
And her
instincts were good from the beginning of the stop. Her instincts and training were good.
Did the right thing. Don't get me wrong. Hey, if you're going to try and kill a cop, you kind of deserve what you get. You know what I'm saying? And everyone was going, the comments on the video are, hey, look at that training. Man, she nailed it. Great job. She's, this is what it looks like. And I'm going, well, wait a minute. This could have gone catastrophically wrong. She could have been a quarter second late and she would have taken the bullet instead of the offender. And you could notice his behavior all the way back here on this timeline. So why didn't we intervene right there? So I think that it's that intervention part of that time to now this is when we step in is a hard thing to learn. I don't know from your experience too, Mike, on how that works with law enforcement training is kind of what's the mentality behind that? What's that mindset? Can we just...
I think a lot of times people get caught up in the moment.
Right.
Folks that haven't had, especially folks, 99.9% of officers haven't had this kind of training. Mm-hmm. I mean, in reality, people don't understand these concepts, and understanding these concepts, just like you mentioned. Law enforcement is under more scrutiny and oversight than ever before, and It's not going to get any better.
No.
So understanding that when you get in a situation, if you feel that you're starting to go down that rabbit hole, so to speak, now it's time. Let's draw back. Give yourself, like you said, the gift of time and distance, because that quarter second would make a huge impact. If I see something going wrong, because I'm reading what they're giving off versus just listening to the words or not paying attention to all the cues that they're throwing off, I've got to make a decision at some point. So I'm looking at the cues, I'm looking at the anomalies, and what do normal people do on a traffic stop versus what's going on in this car.
Exactly. Yeah, and Marin, I want to take umbrage with something you said. My thing is, and I know how you meant it, but I'm not going to put words in your mouth, and I'll let you defend it on your own. My thing is, every suspect deserves due process, no matter how deranged they are, no matter how bad the situation is. And I know, and your colloquial answer wasn't intended to say, hey, shoot the guy if he wants to kill a cop. And that's not the way it came across. But I want to make sure that our viewers, our listeners, our audience understands that in that situation, the gift of time and distance with more training could have increased that time distance gap to the point where there was no shooting.
Yes.
That a less than lethal force alternative. Now, listen, it might have always ended in a shooting, or the person may have accelerated the car out of there and rammed another cop and tried to kill a baby. But in that time and at that place, she was following a line that was going to lead to a shooting based on the training that she had and the intent of the bad guy. The bad guy is always the one that's choosing it. Had she this type of training with the psychological de-escalation component, a bona fide one, not some theoretical stuff. I saw one on TV the other day. They were showing on the news, and everybody was wearing a hood, and all the coppers in the basic training academy, guy came out with a screwdriver, and I was in a bad situation with a screwdriver once. Michigan State trooper ended up center punching a guy that had Phillips head screwdriver that tried to kill us after a burglary, and that protracted case went off there. But it almost was as if the videographer tried to make the screwdriver not as bad as, let's say, a knife, or the screwdriver, wasn't a deadly weapon. And here's this deranged person that's out there, this poor, sick, mentally stressed human, a broken human, and it may be a domestic violence situation. What happened is the coppers drew their weapons and started creating the distance, which is all the right thing. And then the person doing the training said, okay, Watch what happens when we say, drop the screwdriver, and things went haywire and they ended up having to shoot the person. Or if we said, okay, listen, I'm going to put my weapon down. Can we just talk about this? Listen, there's a time to talk and there's a time to go kinetic. But that gift of time and distance helps us to determine which is which. That coupled with the experience of a field training officer, that coupled with actually spending some time on the street and seeing that situations can go quickly awry. Mike, would you agree with me that in the situation of training, that the more highly trained your officers on the street, your coppers are, that they're less inclined to use excessive force? Would that be a fair statement?
I think it's a very fair statement. And I think it relates to, and I think you'll be able to kind of validate what I'm saying here, is that when I first got into business, you first got into business, it seemed like every scenario-based training we did always ended up in a shooting.
That's
we
it.
ended up always shooting somebody. But now the emphasis has morphed and geared more towards de-escalation, which
precisely,
which is exactly what this type of training can help you do, because you'll recognize those signs and signals that the bad guy is giving off, or whoever you're talking to is giving off. They'll tell you what their intent is if you only take the time to read the signals and let it process in your brain, and then go, okay, let me get some distance, let me get some more people here, let's talk this out, versus trying to push the situation forward.
Brian, that female copper saw the cues. She knew something was going sideways, and she might not have been able to articulate which domain the cues came from, but she certainly knew this is going sideways fast and started to break contact, and everything from there was on the suspect. She had no choice other than to escalate when the suspect increased that. And if I know you've got the board behind you, Brian, if I could have you just indulge me for a second. If you can draw just a staircase with like 5 or 6 steps on it in a dark color somewhere on the board there where our viewers might be able to see it.
Will you be able to see here, right? So you mean something like this?
Yeah, exactly. Okay, now, if you point to the very bottom, that line that you just drew, okay, let's call that a baseline for behavior. Okay. And then as we escalate, we would go up a stair. Now, if everybody back home goes, yeah, we're cops, we get this. This is an escalation of force metric or matrix or diagram. We all see that, and escalate and de-escalate. But if you point to that first step right there, and that first step, if we were talking about, putting your foot on that step, that would be the officer presence. That would be the copper actually showing up at the scene. Here's what the viewers don't understand. Officer presence, okay? I want you to start putting a tick mark under that little step there, okay? For each one of these. 1 for uniform. 1 for plainclothes. 1 for off-duty but still a copper. 1 for marked police car. Semi-marked police car. Unmarked police car. Private vehicle but witnessing a felony. Speeding towards the suspect. Parked. Not in a car. On a bike. Do you start getting the gosh damn point?
Right.
The copper has to make all of those decisions in the entire staircase, where the bottom left corner is leave the guy alone and the top right corner is kill him. Every one of those steps is a decision that cop has to make in that nanosecond. Yet, what the people at home don't understand sometimes is look at all those micro and macro decisions in that space and at that time. And it's dynamic and it's chosen by the suspect. And that's why I'm saying the more training and education you get, and I'm not talking kineticism. I'm not talking putting rounds down range, which is necessary training. I'm talking about training and up armoring the brain.
Right. No, and that's the point, and we've made it before. I know. Sean likes to say it as well. Everyone wants to go to the gym and work out. Everyone wants to go to the range and shoot guns. No one wants to train the brain. And I think because there's a lot of analysis with it. There's a lot of experts out there who study. Hey, this is like even just studying the psychology behind some of it. It's like, well, that's all great information for analysis and for studies and to have a better understanding. But how does that help me determine where I need to be on the staircase? And I think that's taking that analysis and conceptualizing that's what I love about this program, the HBPR&A, because now it gives you that decision-making matrix. It gives you a way to articulate and understand, one, through experiences you've already had, and then now going forward, you start to recognize those sooners. And that is,
but it also gives me the competence and confidence.
right.
Look, I want Mike to answer this. Mike, I'm a road copper. I just rammed a vehicle or escalated force or done something, and now I've got to knock on your office door and walk in and tell you that my partner's been shot, or I had to shoot somebody, or I maced somebody, or pepper spray, or whatever the situation is. There was an escalation of force, and now you, as the district commander or the unit commander or whatever else, is going to call me to task on that. What did you consistently see as being the biggest mistake? Was it failed to report right and not adding the artifacts and evidence, a weakness in the training? What did you see?
It's always articulation. It's always being able to put the why behind the action. Saw it time and time again. We have a union involved, so there's always that little piece of it. But when you start looking at when people come in and they take actions, they can't articulate why they did something. It was hinky. He was acting furtively.
Right.
Well, what was he doing? And this program, this training gives you the ability to articulate from the various domains of human behavior of why that person was acting like that. We're all wired in the same way. Like I said,
Yes.
Humans are the same all over the world. We all do the same things. And under stress, our channel capacity goes down. So we're only going to do a couple of different things that provide, we're going to be looking at the thing that's most important to us. We're going to be starting to sweat. Our nostrils are going to flare. We're going to start flushing, the histamine release. If you know those things and why those things occur, you're going to be better off articulating it not only to the commander, but more importantly, to the district attorney or to a grand jury when you're sitting there testifying why you took the action you did.
Yeah, and Brian, one thing I want to make sure, Brian and I have talked about this before, sidebar comments, and I truly believe it. I don't think there's a large number of bad cops. I think there's a number of cops that are fantastic. 5 out of 100 cops that are on top of their game. They're out there ruling the street. We call them street gods. You knew when they showed up at a scene, things were going to get handled and everything was going to be fine. You had 95 oxygen thieves out of that 100 that showed up. They were on the government payroll. When the Eagle crapped, they were there to pick it up. You get what I'm saying? But the hypocritical, first do no harm. At least they were doing the service. I'm sure the military is similar. You rarely found a bad cop. What you did find once in a while was a dirty cop. But more often, and I know you did internal affairs like I did as well, more often you found a dumb cop. And I'm calling the cop dumb because he didn't educate him or herself on rules and procedures or laws or the evidence or the escalation of force. So, Brian, you get what I'm trying to say is I don't think they went into it with nefarious intent.
No, exactly.
I think what happened is they missed an opportunity because they slept at the academy or their follow-on training and had no advanced critical thinking.
Well, and that's how, that there's training is always, anyone who knows anything knows training is the answer. The better trained individual you have, that the training itself is what the military would call a force multiplier, right? I can send in, hey, this one specialized unit of a few guys, or I can send this company size element and get the same results. Well, why? Because those guys have more experience and more training under their belt, so they can do more. And it's the same thing now, but then that goes into, society as a whole. We've made the comment before is, society gets the police, force that it deserves. So if you're not going to invest in their training, if you're not going to pay them adequately and make it a competitive level job, well, what are you expecting out of it? And that goes into it. And I think training is of course always the answer. And I'm sure, Mike, you've seen it in Portland, how that works.
Brian, you hit the nail on the head. I mean, the small unit versus the large unit. I did SWAT, what we call it CERT, for 8 years. Did entry work, and the critical thinking skills that are required of a group of folks. And we were older group. I mean, our average age was probably 40, 45 years old.
Right.
But it's not that we were any better. It's just we were better trained.
Right.
And we were able to critically think. And, we only got into a handful of shootings in those 8 years. And, I'd like to think those were unavoidable, but even now I look back and go, with some of this training, we may have been able to prevent 1 or 2 of those. And
Exactly.
it's things like this that make me a huge advocate of this program, the HBPR&A. It's just like it's incredible to think, because during a kinetic event, the last thing I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be saying, okay, his focal field of view, all functional field of view, all these things are going through my head. No, but I can go back afterwards, and my brain can dissect this, and I can articulate exactly what I saw, the anomalies in behavior of someone who was that we had to take into custody with force. People call it excessive, but no, it's just the force necessary to taking someone in custody. But I could articulate it better now, knowing what I know now versus back then. Back then, sometimes it was a struggle. He was acting furtively. He had a hinky look about him. Now I can describe hinky. Now I can describe what the furtive movements were and why people do the things that they do. And just
one of the beauties of that too, Michael, is
ahead, Brian.
if you think about it, Mike, when you take a look at the situation you just described, the prosecuting attorney's a human. The jury's comprised of humans. The judge is human. I mean, literally, the only person there is the defense attorney that's not. And those folks are listening to another human that's saying, "I saw this. I felt this," and that transparency that comes, that confidence and competence that comes from knowing, "Hey, listen, I made this mistake, and the suspect called me on it and ran." And then when I was chasing the suspect, this happened. That's what juries need to hear. When I came out of the academy, they said, "This is what you write: saw felon, arrested sane. Sign it and turn it in." And Mike, as a supervisor and administrator, you saw that happen a bunch of times. Yeah. Brian, I want to tell you a real quick side note on that. Both of you guys know call sign Lucky. Not going to say his name on the air. Veteran, respected copper, incredible copper on the street, incredible soldier before that. So we just happened to be in the same AO. I won't say the city or the jurisdiction we were working with. And it happened that we're sitting on a house. We went to do the S&W, the search warrant on a house. And a guy in another house thinks we're there for him. He's got felony warrants, a homicide that he did. He comes out of the door on rear left of Lucky with an AK and steps right out on the balcony and just starts spraying with the AK. So Lucky jumps off the railing and into a dumpster. Thank God. That's why we call them Lucky. Do you get what I'm saying? In Monk's mind.
You earn a call sign like that.
You earn it over and over. Suerte. I had about this much room with which to reach up and try to push the AK up and towards the roof of the place and reach down and grab my expandable baton, which this agency didn't have. So instead of having an ASP baton, I had a flashlight, and I'm not going to say Streamlight or Kel-Lite or any of the other stuff, but it was made and issued of plastic. And it was black plastic with a little orange tube that was in the center. So I grabbed it and I swung and I did a common peroneal strike to try to bring the person down so I could then disarm him of the AK, which was still firing. And that flashlight went everywhere.
Broke.
And it looked like when something hits a black hole. Did you see that NASA video recently where it goes all like this? It was the Death Star, that Womp Rat getting exploded. And I just had to think back of that there was a couple of years back, you can probably still find it online. I was in a video with a giant, a guy that was probably 6'8", 6'9", 370 pounds that was attacking with a bat. And I used a Remington expandable baton to disarm him with it. Didn't have to hurt him, didn't do anything. Bent the baton in a U-shape, wouldn't close after that. But it was on their website for a long time. We're talking about using force every day, but the appropriate amount of force comes with the appropriate amount of training and equipment to back it up. When you're not given training or you're not given the right equipment and you're still given a semi-permissive environment with kinetic influences, you have to fight. You have to run. Sometimes you have to shoot and you have to ram. And wouldn't it be better for your folks to have gone through a human behavior element in their training so they're able to articulate what they felt and what they saw before they used the force, why they used the force?
Yeah, and And that's a kind of great point that kind of leads into our discussion on the situation I described with the female officer and the shooting, the officer involved shooting, and it just sometimes you get into those because it's, hey, we got to do something. It's like, hey man, like I've said it with law enforcement I've worked with, like, you get paid by the hour, right? And they're like, yeah. I was like, so if we like sit here for like 3 more hours, you're gonna actually make more money because you're on overtime after that. And it's like,
Yep.
oh yeah, I see what you're saying. I see what you're getting
But
at.
Mike just talked about that. Mike just talked
You get
about it
that
in that
tunnel
moment.
vision.
Exactly.
Yes. And then
Exactly.
it's on, and now our critical thinking, our decision making goes out the window because we're behind that curve rather than setting that curve, being proactive and going, well, no, I'm going to change the trajectory of the situation right now to go and what's most beneficial for me. And I get it too. I understand the mentality when somebody's like, well, these guys are this and they're the worst, and we got a job to do. And it's like, yeah, but is it, what if something, all right, so you get in that shooting, all right, what are the possible second, third order effects for you and your career and your family? And you look at some of the stuff that's happened, officers who at the time are going, I did what I was trained to do, and now I'm on a jury and I'm going to jail. And it's like, so I think that all plays a part in what you're talking about with building competence, which builds confidence. And Mike, what you were talking about too is just, well, now I know how to articulate it. If I can articulate it, now I have a leg to stand on. No, I saw this, so I did this to mitigate it. That didn't work, so I did this to mitigate it. That didn't work, and now the suspect made the decision, not me. And so I that's part of the benefits of the training, I think.
Yeah, Brian, I agree 100%. I mean, the point that Greg brought up about the level of force rising when the training goes down, the level of force goes up.
Yes.
Because if you don't have the training, you're going to resort to basic human instinct, which is self-preservation. You're not thinking about anything else at that point. But when you start getting this kind of training, and right now, I think the majority of training still revolves around, well, first of all, we've got the mandated things from the various political action groups that say you've got to have this, this, and this. Well, then you have your training that's dictated, mandated by the state. And it varies from state to state, but they're all the same. They have use of force laws, things like that. But we don't concentrate in law enforcement. We don't concentrate on the most effective piece of machinery we have, which is our brain. It's the best weapon we have.
Exactly.
I mean, there's no, you can draw a correlation or a reverse correlation, however you want to, with the level of training and the amount of force used on the street. And I think some of these folks that have found themselves in the court systems now that have been convicted of doing crimes, by a jury of their peers, for actions that I think that were very preventable. I think that every one of them. And again, we're sitting here Monday morning quarterbacking, and I hate doing that.
Right.
But having 25 years of experience of doing that work, I feel that a lot of times people get caught up in the moment, and they don't have the training or experience or mindset that's proper to be out there, in a kinetic environment.
Aaron, let's throw some science at this one.
Yeah.
On the board behind you, if I can indulge you again.
Absolutely.
Could you do me a favor and just do a upside down U, kind of make it look like a bell, like the and I'm sorry, you probably.
I gotcha.
Yeah,
I
just
know what you want.
get rid of the staircase there for a second.
Sorry.
What Mike just said, based on all of his experience, 4 decades of experience, 2.5 of those as being a copper. What he just said is called the Yerkes-Dodson law, or the inverted U hypothesis. So Brian, connect the line on the bottom, and that line would be our baseline, and connect it down at 90 degrees. If you look at the left-hand corner at the bottom of the bell, if you start going up that curve, what happens is that's arousal. So as arousal rise from your left to the right up that bell, as the arousal goes up, what's going to happen is on the opposite side of the bell, your performance goes down. So Brian, trace it with your finger, the arousal from the left going up, following it from the baseline and going up that left-hand curve. And as the arousal is going up on that side of the curve, and make an arrow right about there. Okay, that's where the copper is now, let's say, in that section. what's going to happen is on the right-hand side of the bell, because absolutely everything, even parasympathetic nervous system,
Right.
put a down arrow on the other side. What you've got on the right-hand side of that is performance, and performance is going to go down. So what has to happen to offset that, what has to happen is training, not education, because education doesn't change behaviors. Education just tells you why you did something. And Brian, you bring this up all the time when you're training. It can't just be muscle memory, because
Right.
muscle memory doesn't help me think my way out.
It doesn't help you think your way out.
So,
And
so the reason a guy like you got Mike Lee that went through a process just to get hired by a previous company to train this program, they only took the cream of the crop. They only took the best of the best of everybody. And Mike just put it into street terms, what you just wrote about the Yerk Stotson behind you. Arousal goes up, performance goes down, and the only thing to offset that is training, or get your checkbook out and get ready to write the city gets ready to write a big check. Mike, that's happened, I bet.
Absolutely, it's happened. Having worked, with the city attorney on a number of cases that happened where I was involved or supervising. Absolutely. I mean, it boils down to, if you can't justify through proper articulation why you did what you did. It's not saying you did anything wrong.
Exactly.
But dragging it, they would rather settle something, for a sum of money. They'd rather write a check than go through the legal process. And, unless if they look at something and you're able to articulate exactly why, the city attorney will back you to, let's go to court. Let's take this guy to court. They're not going to get a judgment against us. But if you sit there and say, hey, I did this, and I can't really tell you why. I mean, he did some things. He did this. He did that. Rather than saying, well, I watched him. His stance was setting up. He was sitting up. He was bladed. He was starting to look over his shoulders. He was looking around. I know through my training that
and here comes all the pre-event
thing.
indications that somebody behind you is pinning up on that board. Exactly.
Absolutely. So you're seeing all these things, and now that you understand, if I would have had this information 30 years ago, 40 years ago, I can't imagine where my career would have gone. I mean, I think I had a pretty good career. I did okay, but there's just things I would have done differently, and I would have done them differently because of my knowledge. But you're right. The training and the education are two completely separate things. With education, it's the knowledge. If you don't have the training, the knowledge isn't put into practical application. So it's really tough to articulate that even to yourself. Sometimes you sit there and you second guess yourself. But like I said, this training was incredible, and it's I'm passionate to you. I'm out of words right now.
Yeah. No, and I think, and obviously
that's because he's dehydrated from golfing, Marin.
Yeah, I know.
Let him fool you. He worked really hard today out on the links.
No, sir. It was raining today. I didn't play today.
Oh man, you're living it up down there. But no, and obviously there's a lot that goes into the politics behind just a metropolitan police force. Okay, there's a lot involved there. There's this police officers union, there's the district attorneys, there's the community groups, there's city politicians, and but besides all that, so it's understanding why we decide on certain things. We get reactive, and it's like, I use Chicago as the example. Is okay, this was a couple years ago. All right, we're gonna hire 1,000 more officers, and you're like, okay, that's gonna cost, I'm guessing, somewhere over the course of a career, $1 billion for 1,000 officers, for training, pay, healthcare, everything that comes along with that. Minimum, maybe $1 billion. And you're going, man, invest in the people that you have right now that have the knowledge, and invest in the training, get them better. Now we're getting a more highly specialized police force that's smarter, stronger, faster, and can understand predictive analysis, so we can mitigate these things. And then it's like we always say, what are if you do get into one of these situations, you're looking at, you're liable. Like you the training you went through, yeah, it prepared you maybe for that situation, but when you made the decision, now the department says, oh no, you made that decision, so now you're at fault. And it's like, well, wait a minute. You provided me with the tools. All I did was use the tools you gave me, and now I'm in trouble for this. But in their mind, they didn't do anything wrong. They went through that checklist, that escalation of force they were taught.
You're so much on it, Brian. You worked the road with coppers and a task force, and you got to see the stuff we're talking about firsthand. But you've also a decorated combat vet. You've seen the stuff from a rifle scope. You've seen it as a scout that's reporting. The game is the same. It is information, gathering enough information to create intelligence, looking at the intelligence and applying critical thinking skills, and determining what range of responses are likely based on what the bad guys are doing. And what's happened is we've turned that on end. We've turned it on end now, and we're presupposing that everybody that makes a decision is guilty. All of the cops are guilty. Do you get what I'm trying to say? And in that ridiculous worldview, what happens is we're trying to apply things, Frankensteinian things to it, to try to show everybody this is what he could have done. I remember the first cat that came to me with a bag and said, here's the T-shirt of the burglar and this and that and the other. And I said, what's this for? And he goes, DNA. And I'm like, we don't need DNA. He's in handcuffs. He's sitting next to me. We got him in your house, and we don't need the DNA. People are so jaded by television shows and books and all this other stuff. Good old-fashioned police work. The best cops on the road had training, and they continued to actively seek out training and education, and got degrees, and were passionate like Michael was about getting your psychology degree and sociology. Brian, you've continued your education, even though you were a very highly trained killer. And I think Jim Mattis put it best when back in the Combat Hunter days, he said, why are we sitting on this program? Why is it only going to MARSOC? Why are only special forces getting it? Everybody at the tip of the spear gets it, but every deploying Marine needs this type of training. Brian, I think this is a game changer. I think being able to think yourself out of a situation rather than fight yourself out is the wave of the future. We have to invest time and money in an alternative solution, because more guns isn't necessarily the answer.
Greg, I gotta chime in here. Not only does every soldier or a Marine or airman or sailor need this training, I think more importantly, the first responders need this training.
Right.
I think it's far more critical, because we could pull out of every war right now, but we can't pull out of action on the street. We're always going to have problems at home, because we can't take the human. It's the human piece we can't take out of it.
Right.
And if we don't supply our first responders, our thin blue line out there, if we don't give these folks this kind of training and give them and up armor their brain, as you spoke of earlier, if we don't do that, we're negligent. We're negligent as a society for not giving these people the tools they need. I mean,
that's a great sound.
I can't say it stronger than that.
That's a great sound bite. And Mike, one of the things that I love about you and your career, and you're such a valued friend, is that you've always walked the talk. You've always backed up absolutely everything that you said. And I think, Brian Marin, that the point he made, that Michael Lee just made about first responders, we wouldn't see some of the stuff that we saw in the news. We wouldn't see those reports if they had alternatives. And what's happened is we've minted these new soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marine, coppers, first responders, and we pushed them out there with the badge and the gun and said, go do no wrong.
Yeah.
But we didn't give them an architecture for decision-making under stress, rapid decision-making under stress, and problem solving. Where was the sense-making training, Brian?
Sense-making and problem solving. And I think that's a kind of a great kind of point to kind of start to bring it in for a landing a little bit. But it's that idea. We're not giving people the right tools, and then we're just expecting them to always have the right answer and the right tool for the job. And you're going, well, wait, we didn't set those people up for success. And I, right before we got on this, Greg, I just actually reread the article you wrote, the lessons learned on the Amadou Diallo shooting, which I wrote about in my master's thesis as well, because it's the same. It's, you look at those situations and people go, how do they occur? And then we don't understand, but everyone just says, oh, it's because they were this, or it's because they were that. And, we look at it as just, look, this is a failure in human cognitive performance. It's as simple as that. It's performance. That's all it was. It was a failure in performance. Okay, why was there a failure in performance? Well, if I'm not trained to perform in that situation, then I'm likely going to fail. I don't rise to this level and become Superman. I fall to my lowest level of training. And I think that's where it comes into play.
But Brian, just while you're on that point, and I hate to interrupt, but I want to make a point. If your car was knocking, if your timing chain was off,
yes.
if your carburation was wrong, you don't throw the car out and start with a new car. You don't repaint the flipping car. You don't add push bumpers to it. You address the situation that's affecting the performance. And there's a lot of good coppers and a lot of good soldiers and a lot of good first responders out there that are stronger, faster, and harder to kill because they were up armor in their brain. That's all I'm saying is that there's a training component that works, and there's experienced vets that are out there that can give you that training.
100%, Greg. You can't fix everything with a hammer.
That's
I mean, during the 1960s and before, that's how cops fix things. We fix them with a hammer.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
But now we're surgeons. We have to look in that toolbox and see what kind of tool we're going to pick out, because the society is so diverse and so wired into everything. We are under such a microscope in law enforcement and in the military as well. I mean, if you do something wrong, bad on you. It's a lick on you. But if you do it wrong because of lack of training, that's a lick on them.
Mike, I want to bring that point again that you just said. Listen, if you choose not to go to the training or you choose not to use your training, it's on you. But if your administration doesn't provide that training for you, then doom on them, because they know better. And right now, you're going to get it as hard in the streets of public opinion and the court of the streets that you are in any court of the land.
Absolutely.
So you know what? If you know that going in, do the right thing. Do the right thing because it's the right thing to do. And if you don't have the training, go change the training. Go in and say, hey, don't buy us this new, whatever vehicle or some other thing like that. How about sending a couple of us to training? What was that number, Marin, that you used? $1 billion for 1,000 cops on the street?
It was something around there.
I think it's a realistic number.
Yeah.
How much training could you do for $1 billion? How many school resource officers could you train? How many parents could you train?
Yeah, and I think that's a good point to kind of end on there. So I want to thank you, Mike, for coming on and
honored to be here, brother.
And sharing it. We'll have you on future podcasts, but this is definitely a great start, and you bring a lot to the table.
Professionally, Brian, Mike, I know that I can reach out to you on LinkedIn if I want to look up Mike Lee and be able to hire you as a consultant or a professional. Is there any other resource that you would like to give us that we can use to for our viewers and our listeners to look you up, or is that the best portal?
That's the best form. Just reach out to me on there. I think all my personal, my phone number and everything's on there. Just reach out. I got no problem with it. I'll answer you. I don't check it every day because I am kind of retired now.
You're playing golf.
Well, I think logically our viewers might have a question about your handicap.
Yeah, he did respond.
Handicap's good. I'm sitting at about a 7 right now.
I think you did respond once while you were on the course. I'll get back to you. I'm golfing right now. It's just like, I had immediately head went down. Was like, I'm not golfing right now.
Man's got to have his priorities.
Absolutely.
Have his priorities, brother.
Absolutely. Well, we appreciate you coming on here. And if folks want more information, I'll have links up on our YouTube site and the website. So www.arcadiacognerati.com. Left of Greg podcast on iTunes or on YouTube. Click subscribe, click like, share with all your friends. And we appreciate everyone out there listening. Greg, thanks again as usual. And everyone out there, stay safe.
Thanks, Michael. Thanks, Brian.
Thank you.
Brian. Thanks, Greg. Nice seeing you.